Cara Santa Maria is the host and producer of the Talk Nerdy podcast, co-host of The Skeptic's Guide to the Universe, LA area Emmy Award-winning reporter for SoCal Connected on KCET, and science correspondent for Tech Now on Al Jazeera America. But most importantly, she's my friend, Cara. Welcome to the show.
Hey.
Man, your resume is blowing up, huh?
It's getting kind of crazy.
You got a lot of stuff going on, all science-y stuff, and you are my science-y girl.
I'm the go-to.
Yeah, you are my go-to. So I thought you'd be a perfect second guest to have on the show, because you know we had Sam Harris on last week.
Also a scientist.
Also a scientist.
Actually, like, really a scientist. I'm not really a scientist like Sam is.
Is he more of a scientist?
Well, Sam has his
neuroscientist.
PhD. Yeah, Sam actually finished the PhD. He took time off to write his first book, but then he actually went back and finished. I took time off and just kept taking time off. So I got the master's.
Yeah, but you're my science girl.
I know. I'm a science communicator.
All
That's
right,
what
you
I do.
are a science communicator. So that's where I wanted to start, actually, because right under your name right now, it says science communicator. So what is a science communicator?
You know, I think more than anything, it's just a catch-all term that a lot of people in my profession use. So it could mean that you communicate science as an author, maybe you're a blogger, maybe you give talks, maybe you do what I do, which is more in front of the camera work, or even some production work behind it. So sometimes it takes a more journalistic flair, sometimes it takes more of an entertainment flair, and those are two very different camps, but it all falls within that science communication umbrella. I mean, the main goal is to help communicate scientific principles to the public, help improve science literacy, and do a little bit of translation, because sometimes scientists aren't very good at liaising with the public. Sometimes they're amazing, and I love that. Sometimes they need a little bit of help, and so that's where people like I come in.
Right, and I think sometimes people on my side of it need help, and that's why I always bring you on to clean up some of the scientific messes. I'm better at social studies and English, but you help me clean up some of that stuff. So obviously we have some of our old audience that's going to have heard some of what we're going to do here, but we have a whole bunch of new people that I think are going to really dig this. So I want to get to the science stuff later, but I want to start with atheism.
Sure.
Because you're also my main atheist. You and Jacqueline Glenn are my two main atheists. So first off, why don't we do some basic definitions here?
Ooh, this might be tough.
Is this going to be tough? I think you can handle it. Atheism versus agnosticism.
Yeah, so I mean, technically, agnosticism is, if you just break down the word, it's not knowing, right? A lot of people self-identify as agnostics if they say, I'm not sure if there's a greater power, I'm not sure what happens after you die, and I don't want to hedge any bets. Now, I personally think that the label agnostic is redundant, because, you know, whether you're atheistic or theistic, whether you're a believer or a non-believer, I said those backwards, nobody knows. If you claim to know, like, you're full of shit. You don't know.
Right.
You don't know things I don't know.
Right.
You don't have powers I don't have.
And don't the people who scream about it the most, they usually seem to know the least?
Yeah, actually, there are some studies that confirm that. So I think of myself as an an atheistic agnostic, and some people are theistic agnostics, meaning that I, don't factor God into my daily life. I simply do not believe that God exists.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
How do you have morals if it's not coming from somebody up there?
Where do morals come from?
Yeah, well, how do you have morals then?
I mean, morals come
I know
from...
you to be a pretty moral person,
I am,
right? A pretty
I
honest
am.
person, a pretty forthright person.
And
how do you
That's very nice of you to say, actually.
Well, it's true, but how do you navigate the sort of moral divide if you're not getting it from some old book with some numbers?
Right, because I was raised Mormon, too. Let's not forget that.
We're getting to that.
And then I left the church.
Yeah.
So not only, I'm like more of a heathen, I'm kind of the worst criminal within the church's viewpoint, because I actually accepted Jesus, was baptized, and then rejected it, which is way worse than never having it to begin with.
Right.
Where do I get morals? I get morals from literature. I get morals from ethics courses. I get morals from, empathy. I get morals from interacting with people and looking at their struggles and trying to put myself in people's shoes and trying to understand the human experience. I mean, we are innately empathetic creatures. We are innately moral creatures. And the more that we can kind of embrace others, the more that we can try to, I think, remove the us-them paradigm, which is also very human, and it's also very difficult to push past. But the more that we do that, I think the more that we can live these moral lives. And a lot of people want to say that morality is sort of an outcome of religion. perhaps religion is an outcome of morality. Sure, there are correlations between the two, but as I often say when we talk about science, correlation does not imply causality. There's no way to prove that without religion we wouldn't have, or that, without religion we wouldn't have a moral compass. And it's actually pretty philosophically ludicrous to think in those terms.
Right. So, okay, so you are from Texas. As you just said, you grew up Mormon, so in the Mormon church. When did you come out as atheist?
Yeah, so if I'm remembering correctly, I came out when I was around 15 years old. And it was...
Did you consider it like coming out? I mean, how did the
I did.
15-year-old Cara, how did she feel about like actually having to say this thing?
And that's the thing, I actually had to say it because I didn't grow up in kind of a sort of religious household. I grew up in a very traditional Mormon household. So I remember telling my father, I had been questioning for a while and he had been giving me kind of the pat responses of like, pray about it and whatever, you'll figure it out on your own.
Sure.
And when I would pray about it and nothing would happen, and then I was like, what am I doing? I finally remember telling my father, I don't believe. I don't believe, and I feel like I'm lying myself, going to church every Sunday, every Wednesday, every day before school, going to seminary. It was a huge part of my life, and it felt like a big ruse. I think much like somebody who is in the closet and who is struggling, trying to act straight or trying to be somebody that they're not.
Yeah.
And so I remember telling him, and I remember these words, as long as you live under my roof, I have a moral obligation to God to force you to go to church until you're 18 years old.
Wow. So what do you do with that as a 15-year-old?
I didn't live under his roof anymore.
Really?
So it was a big choice. My parents had long been divorced. And at 15, I remember saying to him, technically, I think I'm of an age of consent where if we went to the courthouse and I pled my case, that a judge would say she can stay with her mom full time. It's her choice. She's old enough to make these kinds of decisions. And I was a pretty precocious kid. I'm sure I could have convinced the judge that I had thought about this quite a bit, which I had. And so my father said, okay, he let me make that choice. It was a difficult bind to be in, and I didn't talk to him for many years after that.
Wow.
Our relationship took a big hit, and it took a long time for us to get back on good terms.
Yeah, so there's two really different but interesting pieces to that, because there's the choice that you made in your own life to say, this is who I am, but then there's this other piece of it's not easy for a 40-year-old to say to their parent, I don't believe in what you believe, much less a 15-year-old.
Sure. Maybe it's even easier for a 15-year-old because you're like rebellious at that point anyway.
Right.
I mean, I'm not sure. But that definitely, I look back at the gravity of that decision and I think like, whoa, that was pretty bold of me.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if I felt that way at the time.
Yeah. How do you separate? One of the things we talked with Sam about a lot was separating the doctrine of something from the people that follow it. So in the case with Sam, it was mostly about the doctrine of Islam versus Muslim people. So how do you now, after the experience that you had with your father, believing what you believe, your whole career really is very much based in this. How do you separate the doctrine of Mormonism? I'm sure you have many other family members that you love that are great people and all that. How do you separate that from the piece of you that says, I just don't believe in any of this?
Yeah, I think it's for me, it's easy to separate for my own life, right? Like I can look at Mormonism and I can look at my beliefs and I can say that's bullshit and I don't believe in it.
Yeah.
But of course, there are people that I love who are like hook, line, and sinker. They buy into it. And it's one thing to step back and say, they bought into bullshit. But it's another thing to actually say, I still respect these people and they're well-educated. I don't come... Yes, I come from Texas. I don't come from like rednecks.
Yeah.
My mother, who's no longer Mormon, is an educator. She's a school teacher, recently retired. My father, who still is very much Mormon, is an engineer. And his wife, who is also very much Mormon, is a science teacher.
Wow.
A very good science teacher. And so these are educated people who promote education and who are very good parents, adopted, but teenage children after we had moved out of the house, like incredible people.
Yeah.
And I love them dearly. But we have a big disconnect when it comes to belief. Now, I don't think they need to believe what I believe for us to get along and vice versa. It's one thing when you're in a parental-child situation, the rules are a bit different. But it is still tough because I think one of the things that you take with you, no matter how long after the reconciliation happens, is a bit of pity, a bit of, like, I know in my heart of hearts that I kind of feel sorry that they live this lifestyle. I feel sorry for them that they're sort of enslaved to these religious rules.
Yeah.
I feel sorry for them that they have to struggle with big issues like accepting homosexuality in the family, for example, and their church teaches them that this is an abomination and it's so ingrained in them. But I know they must struggle feeling like, but I love this person. How could that person be an abomination? I feel sorry for the completely religiously inundated that
do you
they
think
have to
they
do
would feel that pity for you too? Like they would look at you and go, well, she doesn't have these incredibly powerful beliefs that
Oh
we
yeah, my
have,
dad
and-
thinks I'm not going to heaven.
Yeah.
Like, can you
well,
imagine?
you're not, because it doesn't exist.
Well, yeah, exactly, and not especially
Sorry.
not the celestial and the terrestrial. And heaven gets super complicated in the Mormon faith.
Right.
But yeah, of course he feels sorry for me. He thinks I'm not going to bathe in God's glory for all of eternity. That's like a pretty big deal to somebody who actually believes that exists.
And you're not doing it just as a private person. You're doing it as very public.
Oh, very
person, too.
publicly,
It's a
and
double M.
and interacting with a lot of people and potentially influencing people, and it's I'm a heretic, and that's probably not something he's very proud of.